Hello and howdy doodly, everybody. If you're listening to this live, happy good morning to you guys. Welcome to Asymmetric Habits with myself, Jerry Hanley, your friendly neighborhood strength coach, and of course, my good, great dear friend, Jonathan Pishner of Apex Counseling, a licensed therapist and counselor for so many folks. Today, we're talking about impending doom. I just wanted to say that for so long in an official capacity. Um, but actually, we're talking about legitimately impending doom, but feelings that basically cause that when they really shouldn't. But just we're human. We have a lot of times we can just experience emotions at much greater degrees than are needed, so to speak. But this came up in talking to JP about just different senses of insecurity that can come up when like just little, well, yeah, little security blankets or little foundations we have, et cetera, may not go exactly as planned or as hoped, and it creates little, like, yeah, stress, maybe a little bit poor situation for a while, but we naturally tend to jump so far forward into what if this is the beginning of a terrible trend, worst case scenarios. I said some, such as bad financial months or bad financial stretch. What if this means that I'm going to be in trouble for a long time, keep losing money? Or when you have a couple of bad workouts at the gym, what is going on? Like, why am I getting weaker? So just the overall human ability to catastrophize, or I probably did not say that right. Catastrophize.
No, actually, that's a word in psychology, catastrophizing. So you
Well,
you 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 made it up after someone else did, but you're good.
awesome. Yeah, I knew it was close, but I wasn't exactly sure um, of every syllable in it. But again, going to hand it over to JP a little bit so he can talk about the nuances of impending doom.
Well, first let's comment on. I don't think we really intended this, but the idea of doing the what's essentially the Halloween podcast on impending doom seems somehow
Nice.
appropriate. So I kind of wish we planned for it a little better, and it wasn't just a coincidence.
Good point.
Um, so this show is going to be not for whenever there's an actual honest to god like destructive event coming at somebody. This is going to be for whenever relatively minor negative events will provoke a much greater negative emotional response than they necessarily deserve. The trouble is figuring out that it's a much greater emotional response than it deserves, because the way this usually comes about for many people that experience it is because they will experience some fairly minor setback or negative event, or just something that is less than ideal, but it's centered around something they care deeply about. And what'll happen then is, since it's a negative event around something they care deeply about, and especially if it's something they've worked a ton of time for,
Mm.
all of our primal safety systems seem to really easily get triggered by it. Matter of fact, here's a classic example that very nearly any person who's done athletics will know about. That first day where whatever attribute you've been working on, your strength, your speed, you start getting to the peak of your abilities, and maybe last week you benched 315 and today you can only bench 305.
Hmm.
Almost anyone who's done athletics has had that happen, and almost anyone who's done athletics then immediately starts to freak out because they think, oh, what's happened? What did I do wrong? Did I forget to eat right? Did I not hydrate? Have I not been training hard enough? And the thoughts start. Oh God, am I training wrong? Is this me when I have the game next week that I'm gonna? And by the time most people realize that they're starting to get into a negative state, they've already gone so far down that rabbit hole that it can be a little difficult to climb out. Matter of fact, I have no doubt that one of your jobs as a strength coach is, as soon as you see somebody start to have that response, is to be no, calm down, it's okay. The fact that you are 10 pounds lighter on your squat this week is not some sort of horrifying, terrible thing. I assume you probably have that.
Oh yeah, a ton of it, and that has given me actually some good topics for people in this show.
Yeah. So, but take it off of athletics. I just select that one because that's one that so many people have access to. But this can happen in jobs. You work so long to get that promotion, and just one day your boss is in a bad mood and makes a frowny face at you, and suddenly the thoughts start like, "Oh God, am I doing something wrong?" It can be around money. For heaven's sake, it can be around money. Love relationships, almost anything you've put a ton of time and effort into. That negative event can trigger an avalanche of thoughts that really make you feel like the whole house of cards is coming down.
Mhm. Absolutely, I feel like the other like finances I personally feel are probably the one that most people will deal with at some point in time in their life, and also one just a lot of people can understand and relate to. Especially, like things aren't the easiest when it comes financially for anybody right now. And I feel like some of the daily stuff, especially again, funny that we're coming up like into the second half of fall and winter. This is one time frame when a lot of bills start to rise up, and it could be as again something as basic as you budget out check the check, you have your monthly expenses, and then that power bill or the gas bill comes up at 250% what it has been lately, something like that. And utility companies aren't the known to be the easiest to work with when it comes to changing like what they charged you, and something like that. Or car trouble, like things are finally you finally feel like you're getting up on your feet, and boom, something goes wrong with your car again, a 800,000, $1,500 repair, something like that. And that just hits a lot of people really hard. It can very easily and quickly, like, basically make you roll backwards down, like, down that hill you just climbed up from. I really like how you pointed out how it really comes, like, so often it comes from things that you either care deeply about or have worked really hard for. And that's why I think finances is a big one for a lot of people. Like you literally work, you try to come up, try to get your feet on solid ground, and then those unexpected expenses happen. It always seems to be at the wrong time because there's never a right time. And it just makes it a lot harder for people to feel like they're ever going to get back up for a while.
Yeah, yeah. Although for today, I'm going to make a clear distinction because there are some people who are actually in a financial situation where
Yeah,
one bill coming in too high is an actual destruction event. This is not going to contain a lot for those people.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
it's very true.
it will contain some for people who like are in a financial situation, and one bill coming in high can be like bad but not destroy everything. People be able to get some out of that from this show, and then for people to get the most benefit today, at least, will be the ones where it's like it really is just a negative mind state,
Mhm.
and they're kind of far away from any sort of real destruction event. Um, so I want to make
Absolutely.
sure
Well,
people ain't waiting. I want to make sure people ain't waiting to hear us say, "Okay, how do I handle the $1,500 car bill?" Because that
right. Yeah.
advice is not coming today. I don't think.
Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, not. Um,
Yeah, but I do get that. My car is a jealous mistress. If she feels like I ain't been paying enough attention to her, then she'll make me spend money on her.
Um, so like you mentioned, like we've been talking, a lot of this is about the mindset and the emotional aspect to it. So I
Mhm.
feel like when you have these events, again, that shift you into this mindset, to me, even as an outsider, it seems pretty similar to like a grief cycle. And like, I'm actually just curious, like, is that semi-accurate idea of it, or like where that first moment you feel is like a yeah like a sadness, panic, whatever, and then you go through different stages, or is there like a better way to handle these responses?
Actually, that's it. In that you will experience similar emotions. That's not wrong because you can because your primary grief emotions are shock, anger, sadness, and guilt. So honestly, you can experience a lot of the same emotions. The nice thing is grief is you can't disrupt it really. It's got to work itself out some, because like you can't kind of talk yourself out of feeling sad that grandma died. You can talk yourself out of the sense of impending doom a great deal of the time. The further you are away from it in an objective sense. So yeah, it's not wrong that you'll experience the same emotions. I hadn't really noticed that, but that is, I would say that's accurate.
Okay. So how would you say that for most people, recognizing that it is a objectively relatively minor situation that they're in, what would be like one of the, in essence, like the top go tos to make that analysis and realize that objectively things aren't as bad as your emotions are telling you?
All right, so there's a section of this that is difficult until people get the hang of it, and there's not a lot of cool ways to describe it that helps people. But part of it is, if you get into a panic state and a dread state, and there's really high emotion states, one of the things to do that's just for anything, it's not even for today's topic, it's just for everything, is really trying to catch yourself and examine, does this deserve the emotion I'm putting on it? And what really is the thing that is hard to get is creating a habit around that. Like, so if I see something happening in my business or in a client case or something, I'm starting to have really big emotions. I now have the habit of, okay, I immediately examine, wait, I'm getting upset about this. Is this a thing that deserves a lot of upsetness? Is this a thing that really is the terrible situation that my emotions are trying to tell me it is? And of course, 99% of the time is the answer is no. It is not the terrible, awful, horrible, scary thing that our emotions are trying to tell us it is. And so in a way, what you're doing is you're trying to get your thinking brain back into the equation. That's the hard part, is like creating a habit. In each individual situation, you're kind of trying to wrench your brain into thinking about, is this worth dreading? So, I gave the athletics example. I'll give one that a lot of people experience, which is, um, they start getting really into their career, and then they start looking for that next promotion, and the pay doesn't go up. That's about as mild a negative event as you can possibly have, especially if you're making relatively enough money. And what they'll start to do is get either a sense of panic or a sense of dread, some kind of impending doom, of like, oh God, have I peaked? Like, what's happening? And they'll start to really invest in that emotionally. Whereas what you would then encourage that person to do, especially if you're there to whisper in their ear right in the moment, is hold on, is this really a destruction event? Is this really something that is a signal that everything is coming off the rails? Because if you're bouncing from a $95,000 job to a $95,000 job, especially if you're in a place where that's good money, where's the doom? Where's the destruction? That there's none. Like, you're doing okay. All you did was you didn't get a pay bump. But since our emotions will want to tell us, like, oh my God, this is so terrible, it's almost hard to wrench our mind back into that objective voice and view it in that way. Once you get good at it, it becomes very easy. But the first 5 or 6 times you're doing this, it feels difficult, but it also feels wrong because our emotions are so insistent upon how terrible it is. So that's the first part, but it's also the hardest part.
Right. Man, at risk of taking this down a tangent that you might have to pull it back into, it's like this actually. I started to wonder how much of this, if any of this, is I don't like the term, but like a first world problem, like almost like a problem because we're in a time of plenty compared to human existence. Like so many of these things, like you said, like going from 95,000 to 95,000, just in that example, aren't necessarily experiences that have been around a ton of time, for people, for society. So, like, I just wonder if these smaller, like these smaller objective things causing larger emotional actions existed in, say, like 1500, like 1543 fiefdoms in Europe.
Well, that's actually a good question, and I mean, with no meaningful way to study it, all I can tell you is my guess. But my guess is that there's a lot to that because one of the things you'll notice about any sort of thing that we would address in counseling, the more of a first world problem it is, the easier it is to deal with
Yeah.
because I can help people not worry about the idea that like they'll never ever be good at anything. It's hard to find a human being who actually cannot become good at anything. That's hard. Uh, it is very difficult to help somebody move to a place of feeling okay when they are actually in horrible situations. Like if we are trying to work with a child who's actually honest to God experiencing child abuse, that's
Yeah.
that's almost impossible to try and move them to a state of wellness because it's not available. So what you're saying is right. The more you're in a good situation, the more a sense of impending doom is actually a first world problem. But my assumption is that evolutionarily, we, I mean, back in 1000 BC, we had societies, but our problems had a tendency to be binary. It was either nothing or death.
Yep.
Because, like, remember, before modern medicine, a scratch on your arm could kill you from
Mhm.
infection. When you were out walking in the woods, a single animal attack could kill you.
Mhm.
Uh, if you broke your arm and couldn't work, well, too bad. You can't eat. You're not going. Nobody's going to let you eat because you're not working for them. You die. Like everything was. If there's a problem, you have uh, a strong possibility of dying. So we don't have easily. It can be developed, but we don't naturally have balanced emotions that can kind of easily categorize like, oh yes, here is a very minor problem, so I will have very minor upsetness about this. We will tend to want to turn whatever our biggest problem is into a life or death problem, uh, and that includes stupid stuff like if your biggest problem is that the Joneses Lexus is bigger than your Lexus, your brain will try very hard to turn that into a survival problem and give you a terrible sense of impending doom.
Yep. It really sounds so ridiculous when we talk about it, but that's exactly how it works.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I mean, humans are wonderfully adaptable, but there's some stuff that we are no longer designed for the society we live in. Uh,
yep. It's funny because there are so many things where I do feel like I'm on the other side of the fence that so many people like live in, where there are a lot of things that I do compare to. All right, like most recent 100 years, all of existence before then. How big of a deal was it then? All right, so suck it up, Buttercup. It's like that actually is present in a lot more of my decision making than it probably should be.
no, no, no. It's actually really, really good because I was already going to say what step two was to help people with this. Since you just handed me that, I'm just going to deconstruct it and tell you what you're doing right
Oh,
because it sounds it sounds like it's overly simplified, but it's not. You're doing something quite correct, which is if we deconstruct what you're doing, you have found a way to detect how close am I actually to destruction. And you kind of shorten it and you shortcut it, but that's what you're doing. So let's take the situation where somebody gets a great big bill that they weren't expecting, like a $2,000 utility bill or something, or a car bill, but they're still financially stable and they still have money and everything. uh, when they get that sense of impending doom, they mistrust at first because that was step one, right? Step two is, okay, how far away from destruction am I actually? Well, okay, I've got 2,000 in the bank to cover this bill. This is not ideal. Even if a second one comes in like this, I can still cover it. And how many of these would actually have to come in before I'm selling my house or just being kicked out because I can't pay the mortgage and I'm living in a cardboard box under the bridge? How many steps away am I actually? And when people start deconstructing that, usually they're 20, 30, or 40 steps away from any kind of actual destruction. And that's what you've done. You've said, okay, 100 years ago, would this have really been a big problem? This has been a survival scenario. Is it today? Oh, no, it's not a survival scenario. Destruction is actually somewhat distant. And then your second phrase, suck it up, buttercup. What you're saying is basically you're finding a way to be dismissive of that negative thought. You're being dismissive of, like, look, this is not real. And you're just talking to yourself in a way that you connect with that helps you be dismissive towards it and remove its emotional power. So actually you've crafted what I would have essentially told you to craft. You just did it instinctively instead of doing it, like, step by step and intentionally. You arrived at the right spot.
All right. History nerd for the win.
So
That's what that one
yeah,
basically.
yeah, I was going to say that's like A plus in psychology for today for you.
Fantastic. Um, so one of okay, so actually, so one just specific tip involving fitness, since like I said, like the example that you brought up earlier came to mind, and then I'm curious to hear your tips on how this could be crafted possibly for other situations. So one way with fitness, like you mentioned, the bad workout, something like that. What happens a lot is again, like we like one sometimes we expect things to happen faster than they do. A lot of people do that when it comes to fitness. Again, that's one of those things you need to learn, and that's one of those places where either doing research and or having good, experienced, helpful, like people in your ear, whether it's reading a book or an actual person doing it or a professional, can help you realize the actual time cost of improving your fitness and improving your health. The other very important lesson that I would say is gets less attention at the beginning is that progress is not linear. And that is where this other issue comes up a lot. Because when you first start training, progress is almost linear because it's like the newbie gains, like just it's there is a very well documented fact that when beginners start training, particularly strength training, they get gains pretty quickly and pretty rapidly. Like they're some of the best, well, the best percentage gains pretty much across. And that's very well documented, and it's more neural than it is muscular, but the two systems work together. I mean, you can't separate them. It is a neuromuscular phenomenon. But I said a lot of people don't necessarily. People might be prepared for it to slow down, but not many people get well prepared for it to actually have down periods in the future. And that's because with health and wellness and training and strength and conditioning, all of it put together, it's what you're looking for is you ideally want to zoom out and get that big picture view. That, like, okay, if I'm really out here, I want this upward trajectory trend line. But when you zoom in, it actually looks a lot more like squiggles. It's that we have periods of ups, periods of downs. You don't
Mhm.
realize that, like, the periods of downs done, like I said, they happen naturally. They also, if handled appropriately, prepare you for the next swing upwards. Like that's when our body's doing a lot of its recovering. That's when it's doing a lot of its adaptation. Like I said, so that they are there for a reason. It's just people aren't mentally prepared for them or accustomed to them. And even if you are, they don't always happen on the days you want them to. It's like, because in the end, you can't control it all. So realizing that it's going to happen is a big one. And that's one of those places where, having a professional or becoming very well versed yourself in crafting fitness plans can help tremendously, because they can make a plan that at least minimizes the chances of things like that happening unexpectedly, and then purposefully plans periods in where to let that happen, to almost guide it. We've done an entire podcast on deloading before. Like that's where
Mhm.
deload weeks can happen. It's a planned down week to let your body recover, so it has more up weeks coming up. Um,
Yeah.
a couple other
And
strategies.
let's comment something about what you're
Yeah.
saying here because this is good. Having someone to give you the more objective, rational thought is actually intensely valuable. Because what you're saying there,
Mm.
especially because we did do this exact thing on deload and rest and everything. Uh, when I have to remind myself to do that, I don't even hear that in my voice. 'Cause I only hear that in the voices of my numerous coaches and physical therapists who have bitched at me constantly about resting more. But whenever I come up with like, oh, maybe it's time for deload week, I don't hear that in JP's voice. I hear it in Nick's voice and Jack's voice and like somebody else's, because for reasons that are unclear to me, that objective thought just,
Mhm.
I emotionally want to reject it. I emotionally want to work more. And so I actually did need somebody to give me the more objective thought, and that's a valuable thing to have. So the thing you're suggesting to people is wonderful. Like if you can't get the objective thought out of your own brain, fine, go get it from somebody else. As a matter of fact, in a way, we instinctively do that whenever we tell people like, "Oh, listen to this terrible thing that's happening to me." One of the possibilities is that people will be like, bro, you're actually okay. This is not a big deal. Like
Mm.
you're going to
Yeah.
get through this just fine. In a way, we kind of invite people to do that a little bit for us instinctively, but especially in athletics and in several other areas, finances. You can get a financial advisor, talk to your bank or whatever. You can get that rational voice from outside of yourself if it's too difficult to access it from inside of yourself.
Yeah, great point, pointing that out. Um, the last thing I wanted to hit on that, and then I said, see how like what else you might draw out for outside of the fitness world is in a way like it. This is almost semantics, but it's a very useful form of semantics, if you will. It's when it comes to training, there's lots of different ways that you can define an intensity that you want to train at. Like, I mean, you can literally just say, "Oh, today's supposed to be a hard workout. Today's supposed to be an easy workout." But then, some people go as far as using like percentages of maximum weight. Then some people use a rating of perceived exertion scale. Since there's all sorts of ways to do it. In my case, I like to keep it simple. And unless I have a very serious athlete who's also been training with me for a few years, I very rarely go into the more specific objective ones like using percentages. I keep it simple, like just using simple, like one word, like words that people have, but they have meanings. Like the biggest ones would be like, if we're looking for the best efforts of the day, when you want your best performance, if I say max in a workout, that is my cue. So I'm like, okay, we're legitimately going all out. We want the best result we possibly can here. So that also means if I've done my job right, or my coaches have, that in our cases, that we have appropriately set you up where we believe you have a very high chance at giving us a true max, a true like good result, maximum result. However, a lot of times I actually use that very rarely because, again, that is a planned, hopeful objective where we maximizing chances to get to. What I use much more often is like work to a heavy set of one or a heavy this, which means exactly what it sounds like. Like, okay, I want you to get to the best weight you can or the best weight that simply feels heavy on this exercise for this many reps. But once it literally feels heavy, stop for the day. Like that's the effort that I want you to give. So I'm not looking for 100%. I'm just looking for what is heavy today. That could be a new max for you. That could be a weight you've never touched before. It could be 85% of what you've done before. It could actually be a lot less, like you said. But it lets you perform while taking complete consideration of how you actually feel on this day. And again, it avoids physical burnout, like of the nervous system, but then it also avoids feelings of, or at least minimizes possible feelings of like, yeah, like depressed performance if you didn't do as much as you thought you did, etc. Because like it wasn't calling for a, hey, this is theoretically your best period. This is what you feel like today.
Okay, so that's one of your methods to kind of interrupt that sense of not doing enough, so you don't get that sense of impending doom. Is that what you're getting at?
It's both. It's actually, like I say, it's it's that, like I said, it does avoid that feeling of failure mentally, but it actually is also a physical tactic. It is an objective tactic by considering where your body is at on that day. So that way, days you're more fatigued, days you're more stressed, maybe it didn't feel right, maybe it's just a bad day, maybe it's a great day. All of those things pretty much get to come together and influence how well you do, rather than simply trying to hit a top number. Because especially, athletes or serious lifters, if they feel like they're going for a max, they're going to want to beat what they've previously done. Like what you mentioned, you bench 315 one day, and then the next time you can only do 305. So that's a mental defeat, because you had a goal that you set for yourself and you're trying to surpass that. So anytime you're going for like a max lift, you mentally want to surpass the previous one. So instead, we're through the workouts when it's not necessarily about doing a true best ever, but I just want your maximum effort for that day. Then it removes that expectation, or at least it should separate that expectation of, hey, this has to be better than you've ever done before, or you suck. It removes that. And this is also a doc like this has been documented to be anywhere between 6 to 14% difference, um, than a like true maximum effort. Like when people tend to be in that situation of, I have to perform today or I really want to, it's 6 to 14% higher on the ratio of like what they can actually hit versus underperform.
Okay. So yeah, you're taking it like super micro, which is basically like so if we took it off the athletics example, this is kind of also for the person who can easily feel really bad and feel a sense of upsetness at themselves if they weren't like maximally productive at work. So you're almost kind of like proposing uh, shrinking it way down and kind of deciding in a day what are the actual goalposts here, instead of just assuming like I should be maximally productive, I should lift as much as I can. Okay, I finally see where,
Defining
but
the
it took me a
goalpost.
minute to figure out what
Yeah,
where in the world we
defining
were
the
going with
goalpost,
this.
that was key. Yeah, defining the goalposts, that was key.
Y-
Um,
Yeah,
really
okay.
picking
So
up,
that's good for
like,
like ultra micro, and that's actually really good for the work folks who get really focused around productivity, because there's an easy myth to fall into, and a lot of people get a lot of very consistent upsetness about this. That just like your max lift, whatever your like maximum productivity is, that you should be able to do that just every single day
yes.
on any
Yeah.
given day. And being in contact with that, like you can't do that, would actually be useful for not getting a sense of impending doom for the people who are very vulnerable to that. I've been vulnerable to that in the past. I assume most entrepreneur business owner type folks are, uh, and I imagine you probably have been. So
Mhm.
yeah, defining your goalposts and knowing you can't do max effort every day is, I would say that, yeah, that's probably a pretty good point.
Yeah, because really it's like a strategy, and I really like the defining goalpost. It's like a strategy for minimizing your chances of disappointment or feeling like it's a failure. Like minimizing you feeling like you need to do a certain amount, and maximizing your chances of feeling like you're going to actually do better, and like or win, so to speak. Because yeah,
Mhm.
like it's not like, okay, you don't have to achieve this, but if it is a good day and you do hit a good max, then that's going to feel doubly awesome. it's because it's like, hey, like I just set a new PR and I wasn't even necessarily supposed to today because it was not a max day. um
Mhm.
it's funny because actually just we talked like yesterday. I was listening to a book on marketing, and I I am not particularly saying that I approve of this exact strategy, but they mentioned pre-selling expectations lower gradually over time, until you find a drop-off point, but then using that just so like the sense of accomplishment was even higher when someone does come through, and maximizing the gap. between expected level of accomplishment and actual level of accomplishment. So it's just like in a way of almost minimizing the promise, or like minimizing your own sense of like what I have to do, but then when you overshoot it, feeling that much better. That was like
That
a weird.
that's a good that's a workable sales technique. That's tricky internally because most people will have a sense of exactly how much they're deceiving themselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like that's what's like. I'm not. I can't. I'm the type of person I can't lie to myself very well. So,
Most people cannot. Matter of fact, that's actually why you have to be very careful when you do cognitive behavior therapy, because a lot of therapists will accidentally try and sell people like way over frilly positive thinking that is actually untrue, and people will know if they're using positive thoughts that are untrue, and you'll
mm,
eventually reject them. So you actually have to really make sure you're selling positive thoughts that are objectively true. Although, I mean, the nice thing is, since you can't lie to yourself, if you really kind of deconstruct the impending doom stuff, it works the same way, because if you can get in contact with the fact that you are not anywhere near destruction, it's way easier to separate from that emotion.
mm,
Uh, so as we move into uh, as we move into kind of like final phases of the show, I want to really re-emphasize the ability to deconstruct that a lot, because I say that, but I notice whenever I do it with people, like in a counseling session or otherwise, a lot of people need help the first few times deconstructing stuff. So you actually do a really good job. If you happen to have any other scenarios, I'm going to give one scenario. But if you happen to have any other ones that you can lob me, this would be good, because I'm basically going to do a couple of sample deconstructions to help move out of impending doom. So one of the yeah, I did the one about the finances. One of the ones that a lot of like entrepreneur types and executive types will experience is missing metrics. You
mm,
know, profit and loss won't be where it's supposed to be, or I was supposed to get X number of customers this month, but I only got this. I missed. I was supposed to grow by this many employees, and I missed it. Whatever. Um, so if we recognize that the sense of impending doom is basically making a non-survival situation a survival situation, then we would look at, okay, you missed this metric. What does it actually mean that you missed the metric? Does it mean next month you're fired if you don't make it?
mm.
Well, 99% of the time that is not accurate, unless you biffed it way worse than most people do. So what really happens? Most of the time, you would actually have to experience 3, 4, 5 months of missing that metric to experience a problem, whether it's your own business or a business you work for. So, okay, so you got 4 more months to bring it up. Do you not know how to bring it up? Do you really, honest to God, not know what happened? Well, actually, I do know what happened. Well, okay, so now you have several steps to make sure it doesn't happen over the next 4 months. And keep chewing on exactly like what all has to happen to make sure that destruction doesn't occur. Most of the time, it'll be numerous steps before anything horrible happens. And then one of the things we would do for the person who it's not their company, like they're just an executive, they work for somebody. Well, okay, let's say you do miss it for 5 months. How long until the home's repossessed and you're now living out of a cardboard box? Oh, 9 more months after that. So even if you do nothing and you just like sleep under your desk for the next 5 months and get fired, you still have 9 months after that. So you're 15 months away from destruction.
Mm.
And most of the time, it's so far off that people can then start to get a little dismissive of it. So that's a good one for the business productivity side. I don't know if you happen to have another one I can deconstruct off the
I
top of your
mean,
head.
yes, in a way, and because we also haven't necessarily touched on it, but that is so sense of impending doom, when it
Yes.
comes to
we needed like a sound snare to go with
one of
that
those,
for today.
really big, like, bass sounds. It just super
Yeah.
deepens my voice. But when this happens with, relationships, um, like fights, bad like, fights, and, like,
Mm.
whether it's losing a friendship or, just have, like, when just a bad fight, and it's like, okay, again, like we've said, I mean, sometimes it could be big, but in general, how like ways to tell the difference from that one and strategies about how to move on.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one because a lot of people have a lot of social anxiety. Although I'm going to do this deconstruction with the recognition that people who have anxiety over relationships tend to have great difficulty employing this. So if you have trouble with this at first, don't feel too bad because that seems to be a trend. But it would be the same thing. So let's say, oh, I said something unskillful to somebody I care about, and I mean, let's just pretend they actually did get mad. They got mad at me. Well, what's the destruction condition? Losing the relationship. So, all right, they got mad at me. We deconstruct. Did they get so mad at me that the relationship is actually over? They said, never ever speak to me again. Don't you dare call me, lose my number, block you on social media. Probably not. I mean, every once in a while somebody does something that dumb and that unskillful, but not usually. So okay, so they didn't ditch you. Clearly, the door is still open. All right. Do you really not know what to do to start salvaging this and making sure you don't lose the relationship? You made them mad. What's step one? Apologize 99% of the time. So okay, I know what my first step is. I got to apologize and see if I can reconcile. And then let's pretend that the apology is difficult. Well, okay, if they'll still talk to you, you're still not that close to destruction because you can apologize, and even if it doesn't land well, they're still with you. So what would you then have to do if you were going to lose this relationship? What else do you have to do? You probably have to make them mad a bunch more times, especially if it's a long-term relationship like childhood friendship or a love partnership. Most of the time we can figure out, oh yeah, actually they're as long as I don't make them that mad again for a little while, like I can rebuild some relationship credit. So destruction is still fairly far off, although it's harder to do that as objectively as you can with a job. But how many times do you really lose a relationship over you said one unskillful thing, they got mad, and they never spoke to you again?
Yep. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely thankfully a more rare occurrence than I think people tend to think of in the moment when that's happened.
Yeah. Although we do have to acknowledge it happens every once in a while over although online interactions are different, but people will do that online. But deep connected friendships, deep connected love relationships, this is way less likely to happen
There you go. Awesome. Good stuff, man. Any other closing thoughts you want to give our people?
with. No, just bullet points. Try and mistrust senses of impending doom and really figure out how close is destruction. Figure out how many steps there actually are between you and some sort of horrifying result. Usually there's anywhere between 10 and 50 steps before anything terrible actually happens. And then try and be more connected with just like, oh, actually I'm fine. But recognize your brain is going to want to try and turn silly stuff into survival scenarios. So
Mhm.
this is a battle that is never fully won. If you get good at it, you can make the battles short, but your brain will always try to whisper something to you at some point for a sense of impending doom.
Oh, our silly human brains.
Oh, our silly human brains. One of my oft said phrases whenever I rant about this is brains is dumb.
I like that. All right, brother. Good time as always. Hope you guys listening, get something valuable out of this. Something that you can just make these situations a little bit shorter, a little bit better, and easier to handle for you. Again, share the word about the show. Like again, we have a great time doing this. It's awesome anytime we get some feedback coming back, whether it's like a text message, a comment on a broadcast, anything about people really getting into these episodes. Again, Asymmetric Habits can be found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We release one episode in the middle of every week. Generally, after the live broadcast here, they can usually be found the next week in the podcast. And then we also release some of the 2 years of archived episodes we'd already had before in weeks in between too. So good mixture of old and new content in the podcast. So again, on behalf of JP and myself, catch you guys later.